The session we're going to run now is all about compelling commercially valuable marketing actions. And one of the things that I see with a lot of marketing strategies right now is that nobody's really measuring actions. And it's really the only way to measure marketing success. Just a little bit about me. My name is Lyndon Johnson. I'm the founder of a company called Think Differently. And the company was founded back in 2011 with the aim of solving a problem that I've seen every day working in the mainstream industry, which was that customers were asking why public relations and marketing strategies weren't delivering the commercial outcomes that they had expected or that they had hoped for. And the reality was that the strategies were never designed to do that. In a lot of cases, there really wasn't much strategy at all. It was all about bolting tactical implementation activities together and calling it a strategy, and I wanted to try and fix that. I'm also the general manager of CommsBar, which is a walk-in clinic for PR and marketing advice. It works in the same way that you would do with a medical clinic. We're the Genius Bar, only with CommsBar you can ask questions, bring problems related to PR, marketing, publicity, and talk to somebody that actually understands the problem that you're facing, that has domain specialism skills to be able to figure out how to solve the problem, and we have tools and resources that will help you to move forward, either independently or working with us in whatever capacity you need. So this session's on compelling commercially valuable marketing actions. One thing that I want to explain is the title is very deliberate. There was a piece written about Calvin Klein's obsession, the cologne, the perfume, a few years ago, that said actually it was named incorrectly. Rather than being called obsession, it should be called compulsion. And the reason behind it was that when you're compelled to do something, you do it without really understanding why. Somebody asks you to do something, somebody compels you to take an action. You do it really without thinking. And so that's why marketing is really all about compulsive actions. The other part is about commercially valuable. There's a lot of focus right now on clicks, on traffic, on email opens and stuff like that. In reality, most of those have very little commercial value, either because the content inside has no value or the action that's being taken doesn't lead to anything that is commercially measurable. In most cases, for startups in particular, the measurement metric is dollars and cents, although it doesn't have to be. In large organizations, it can be measured in incremental progress, with dollars and cents being the ultimate measure, but may not be the measure of every marketing action. But for startups and small businesses, the major metric is going to be transactions, dollars and cents. So we're going to look at that. First, just a little bit of background. I was a journalist for the first decade of my career. I then went into communications, and I've been working in that space for 20 years. I worked in traditional agencies in the UK, and when I came to Canada, I wanted to try and fix the problem that I explained a couple of minutes ago, and so started a business with the intention of fixing that problem, of making public relations and marketing work for entrepreneurs, whether a startup or small business. And the result is a system that's actually applicable to businesses of any size, any stage, and can be used by people with varying degrees of understanding of how public relations and marketing works. Whether you're an entrepreneur that has very little experience, or you're a CMO working in a Fortune 50 company that is developing strategy every day and managing the tactical implementation of that. The system that is going to form the basis of the next 20 minutes or so is based around a system from a book which I read when I came to Canada. It was just published, and it was Eric Ries's Lean Startup. The methodology for Lean Startup was focused on product, and it was based on something that had been developed by Steve Blank, the customer development methodology. But when I read the book, I saw that there arguably could be some value in the process, the system that Eric was discussing, designed to minimize risk and also minimize waste for building products, to building communication strategies. And that process is build, test, and learn. Now we put measure in there because in communications industry, in the traditional industry, measuring the impact of what we do has been something that predates my involvement in the industry. And the way that it's being done in the mainstream industry right now, I'm not sure they're ever going to figure it out, but I think we have a way that could be a solution for that. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. But build, test, measure, and learn. It's an iterative process based on testing assumptions, validating them or disproving them, but validating them with evidence and learning from that process to improve what we're doing, to iterate towards a strategy that achieves the desired outcome. This is how it looks in the book. It's a circular process, and it's designed to be done at speed. The faster you iterate, the faster you get to the outcome that you're trying to design a strategy for. The other inspiration for what I'm about to show you is from Alex Osterwalder, his business model generation book and the business model canvas that formed the base of that content gave me an idea for using the principle of visual learning tools or visual information gathering tools to see whether there was something that we could use to do the same thing but for communication strategies. And so what you're going to see uses some of what Alex developed but applies it to the communications space. The last thing I want to explain is definitions. Definitions of what it is we do. If you ask 50 people working in the industry what public relations is, you're likely to get 50 different answers. Indeed, somebody tried it recently and this is exactly what happened. And the problem is that much of the definitions that are used are full of tactical application. The definition is defined by whatever that industry or that practitioner does, rather than looking at what the desired outcome of that domain, that discipline is. And so when I started the company, one of the things I wanted to do was to take the definitions back to the very basics and focus only on the goals, the outcomes that we were trying to achieve from each of them to define what the term means. And so public relations is a strategic process of building and maintaining strong mutually beneficial relationships with key people, with the people that matter most to the organization. Ultimately, what it's about in the workshop earlier, I was talking about building actionable relationships. A strong relationship ideally will be actionable in that it's at a point where it's strong enough that when you ask somebody to do something, they're willing to do it, they're compelled to take that action. Applying the same logic to marketing. Marketing is a process of compelling people to take commercially valuable actions. The action obviously has to have value for the person taking it, but it also needs to have commercial value for the business that's asking it to be taken. And if there is no action, marketing by definition has failed. And if there is no commercial value, however you're measuring it, whether it's progress, whether it's ultimate impact, whether it's dollars and cents or something else, the question is why take that action? Why are you asking people to do it if there is no commercial value? And publicity. Publicity is really what the mainstream PR industry does. And they may say they do different things, but in reality, they're trying to generate awareness via media, whether that's third party and it's distributed independently of the organization, or whether it's owned content, which is delivered directly to the consumer, via a website, via social media, or via an email communication. But publicity really is a strategic process of generating commercially valuable awareness with the people that matter most and with the people that are important or critical to achieving a specific outcome. Otherwise, it's awareness for its own purpose rather than actually benefiting the business. And again, the question is, why are you doing it? I talked about visual tools, and this is our set of visual tools. A framework of 8 canvases. 8 canvases that are designed to help develop strategy in each of the key areas. Building and maintaining relationships, activating them, getting people to take a commercially valuable action, communicating at scale. Once you have people engaged, then you want to communicate with lots of people that share a similar trait, a similar demographic, a similar job description. And you want to communicate with them at scale. And so we have a canvas that helps organizations to do that. We have one for earned media, for dealing with journalists, how you build relationships with journalists, how you actually encourage them to be interested in what you're doing. One for announcements, news, whether it's through a third-party outlet like a website or a trade journal, or whether it's delivered directly. And 2 on brand, one to engage and the other to communicate brand. Brand is all about values. It's what you stand for as an entrepreneur, it's what you stand for as an organization. And so we have a canvas that helps the companies that we work with to develop their brand and to validate it, to make sure that what it stands for and how it's going to communicate it is actually what the key relationships, the key people to the organization's success expect to see it, and then communicate it. With brand can be used in multiple different ways. It can be used as a PR tool for building and maintaining strong, mutually beneficial relationships. It can be used for getting people to take commercially valuable actions. People want to take an action because they believe in what the company does. Patagonia, Body Shop, some great examples, Nike. And they can also want to be a part of the community, want to know what you're doing because they believe in the values that the company stands for. So it can be used for awareness as well. So we have a framework of canvases, and you'll see from the arrows that some of the information that we need for some of them, we need to get from one of the other canvases, and it transfers across from one to the other. So a series of visual tools, and we're focusing on the Activate one today for this session. The one I didn't mention is the mapping canvas, and that's simply a way to organize key relationships. When you know who the people are, you can identify who they are, you can identify who the key relationship is in an influence relationship, or who can help you build a relationship with somebody that you need to build in order to achieve an outcome. And that's really just a way to map and to understand. It also helps you to judge the relationship's strength, because you need to know whether or not a relationship is strong enough to support the action you're asking somebody to take. Something that we covered in the Building Actionable Relationships workshop. So if you're interested in that, please look at that one. Go into a little bit more detail about building and maintaining actionable relationships. For the purposes of this canvas, the Product Marketing Fit canvas, the assumption is that you have actionable relationships. You have people that are ready and willing to take an action on the basis that you can make a case for them to do so. You can give them a reason. And so this is the canvas that we'll be looking at today. Again, it looks very similar to all of the others in the framework in terms of look and feel, but it's specifically focused on testing assumptions that, if valid, will increase the chances of the person taking the action you ask them, and if you can disprove them, then there are going to be barriers to you actually getting the outcome that you want, because people won't take the action that you're asking them to. And so we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail now. So So the first important cell, top left, as you look at it, is the desired outcome. What is the outcome that you want? What are we building a strategy to achieve? It says here it must be achievable within the next 90 days. For startups and small businesses, everything needs to happen at speed. It must be realistic, specific, and measurable. If it's not realistic, the chances of building a strategy to achieve it are slim. If it's not measurable, we can't measure whether or not we achieved it. And if it's not specific, there's room to kind of justify the fact, well, we almost got there, so let's just say we did. The other thing is that it needs to include an action, because this is about compelling an action. And so the outcome needs to include somebody taking an action, somebody or a group of people taking a commercially valuable action. So how do we do that? Well, the assumptions that we make, the first one is positioning. Is how do we make what we're offering in terms of value different from the competition? If we're asking somebody to take an action that benefits them and also me as an entrepreneur or the company, we need to ensure that there is a reason for them to do it, to choose us rather than a third-party competitive product or service. And so the positioning is really important. And I work with a number of specialists that work with entrepreneurs to help figure that out. But getting that positioning locked down and understanding it in the context of the action you're asking people to take is really important. Because without that, it's going to be very difficult to get them to take the action that you want. The next assumption is the action itself. What are we asking people to take if we're going to get the outcome that we want? Do we know what the action looks like from the person we're asking's perspective? Because if we don't, it becomes increasingly difficult to understand what their experience of the call to action looks like. And so understanding what that action is important because it means that it makes it clear for us to be able to explain to them, to be specific about what we're asking them to take. There are two types of call to action. And it's not accidental that marketing communication must have a call to action because you're asking people to take an action, to do something. But if we don't understand what the action is, it's very difficult to ask them to do it specifically. It could be an explicit call to action, go to the website and purchase my product. It could be something that's implicit, that by the nature of the relationship that you have with them, you understand that by asking them to do something in a certain way, their understanding of it is the way that you hope they will understand it, or you know they will understand it. Volkswagen had a perfect example. The campaign a few years ago, Drivers Wanted. It was all about getting people to go to the dealership and to test drive their new cars. They understood that buying a VW was like joining a club. They didn't say go to a dealership and test drive a car. It was just they were taking applications for new members to the VW club. It's an implicit call to action. So once we've figured that out, the next thing we need to look at is timing. When do we ask somebody to take an action? And understanding that in relation to the desired outcome, understanding how we're different, understanding the action that we're asking somebody to take, timing is vital. Understanding what opportunities there are, if there's a regulatory requirement for an organization, if you're selling to enterprise, to have a solution to a problem by a certain date, or whether it's budget, knowing that they can't take an action until they have money and they don't get the budget to be able to do it until January 1st or April 1st. If you want them to do it in a certain time period, they don't have the money within that time period, you might want to park the opportunity and focus on something that you can achieve in the time that you need the outcome to be achieved by. So understanding timing is really important. And then the next cell is the call to action mechanism. So you understand the differentiator. You understand the action you're asking people to take. You understand the timing constraints or the timing opportunities. The next assumption is the call to action mechanism. If you're asking somebody to do something, how do you ask them to do it? Can you do it via a web page, a landing page? Can you do it via an email? Can you do it via a mass email rather than an individual one? Do you need to customize it so you need to send them an email individually? Do you need to shake hands with somebody, go meet somebody, go talk to somebody? Do you need to do it at a certain location via a third party? All of these things factor into building a strategy that achieves the desired outcome, that gets somebody to the point where they're compelled to take an action. And so all of these things factor into the process. Building a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is really a combination of the assumptions of what you think it's going to take to compel somebody to take an action which drives the desired outcome. Hypothesis can be tested. And the point of having the assumptions and the hypothesis is that we can now test each of the assumptions that we're making to validate or to disprove, to enable us to actually work with facts rather than doing a whole load of work, a whole lot of tactical implementation, spending money, resources, time, only to find that the strategy doesn't work. We didn't get the action that we wanted. People are not taking it, and as a result, we don't get the commercial outcome that we want. Now, we can test any of the assumptions, but Eric Ries's book talks about testing assumptions that are likely to cause failure or to identify the things that customers don't see as valuable in a product. And so we're doing the same thing. To avoid spending thousands of dollars, investing hundreds of man-hours, weeks or months of time only to find out that something didn't work, we flipped it on its head. We want to know what the riskiest assumption is that will cause the failure of the strategy first, and test that one first. Because if we get all of the others right, but there's one that we don't know about and we leave that to last, the strategy is still going to fail. And so we want to identify which one of the four assumptions is going to stop somebody taking an action. I get asked what an experiment looks like. And so here are a few examples. Positioning experiment, about understanding what the differentiator is, understanding why somebody would buy our product or service, where they would choose somebody else's instead. There's two action experiments, testing whether we understand what the action is we need somebody to take in order to get them to help us achieve our desired outcome. There's also a call to action experiment. Are we explaining what we want people to do in enough detail that they understand clearly? Because if there's confusion and they don't know what to do, the likelihood is they won't do anything. And if they don't take the action, by definition, marketing has failed. If marketing fails, we don't get the action, we don't get the desired commercial outcome that we're looking for. Timing experiment, all about understanding the landscape. What time constraints, what time opportunities are there? If we want somebody to take an action, can they do it in the time scale that we need them to take it? And if they can't, we need to rethink whether or not the outcome is achievable based on the working hypothesis that we have. And the call to action mechanism, delivering the request for somebody to take an action. A lot of it's gone online, a lot of it's gone to social. But actually, do we need to ask somebody face to face because they want to look into the whites of our eyes before they'll be compelled to take the action? Do we need other third parties involved? Do we need influencers, but people that have real influence, not people that simply have a lot of followers? So we can test it, we can run experiments. And so these cards give you an overview of what the experiment looks like with some summary questions that you might want to ask. We've also developed a system, as you can see, that matches the cell on the top half of the canvas with the experiment board on the bottom. So there were two halves to the canvas. The first half is actually generating and testing the hypothesis, identifying the riskiest assumption. The bottom half is all about running experiments. And so using a very simple visual scheme, it makes it easy for anybody to see which assumption is being tested and to find the experiment card, the master card, that actually has that information so they can understand exactly what the methodology for the experiment is and to monitor progress. And this is just the top and bottom of the canvas using that system. And this is what the experiment cards look like. Very simple. The first part is, what are we testing? What's the assumption in one sentence? If we want to learn one thing, we want to validate one thing, what is it? Second, below it, is a summary of the experiment, of the methodology. How are we doing it? Is it being done by marketing? Is it being done by sales representatives? Is it being done through influencers, social? Just so everybody's clear, it gives us a control. Everybody's running the same experiment, which increases the chances of the data being exactly what we expect and being able to compile it together. Two boxes on the next line, a measure of success. How do we determine whether or not we validate the assumption or not? Is it a majority? Is it we're looking for a qualitative answer? But defining what that is before you run the experiment is important for measurement. And then we can record the outcome. Do we validate the assumption or do we disprove it? Qualitative and quantitative. And then the bottom part is really important. So what do we learn that we didn't expect or we didn't ask, but we learned nonetheless? The process of running these experiments is a wealth of knowledge. And unless we record it, it gets lost. And so the experiment card has a space for that, so that somebody in the sales team or in the marketing team or somebody in strategic comms can look at it and say, well, we validated this, we invalidated this assumption, but we also learned this, and we're hearing this a lot. We're getting the same feedback. It helps improve what we're doing. And so that's an experiment card relating to getting somebody to take a commercially valuable action. And as we go through and we run the experiments, it's the same as with Eric Ries's Lean Startup methodology. The faster we run the experiments, the faster we iterate, the faster we validate each of the core assumptions that stand between an organization and a commercially valuable action. And as we validate all of them, ultimately we end up with a strategy. Something that we have a degree of certainty that if we do it, we have the evidence to support that's the right way to do it. It will result in people taking commercially valuable actions, and those actions will help us achieve the desired outcome that we were building the strategy to achieve in the first place. So that's a very quick overview of the system for validating, building, and testing and measuring strategies designed to compel commercially valuable actions. The fundamental piece of marketing and the piece that doesn't get talked about. If there is no action, marketing has failed by definition. The more commercially valuable actions we get, the faster the business grows, the more successful we get at understanding how to ask, the quicker we can develop strategies over and over again. The less assumptions we make that are not actually based in evidence. So finally, this is just a shot of me and one of the CommsBar specialists. CommsBar is based in the building that I'm in right now in downtown Toronto. It's on University Avenue. Inside the Staples store, there's a shared workspace to my right, and also this is a presentation space called Spotlight. CommsBar is a walk-in clinic, as I've said. If you have a problem, you can bring it, walk in, ask a question. We'll diagnose the problem using the framework. We'll make recommendations on steps for treating the problem, and we have the tools and resources that mean that you can continue to develop a solution on your own if you choose, or if you need more help, we have the specialists that are able to help you to solve that problem or to solve problems that arise as you build the business. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. You can drop comments into the comment panel on the video, or you can come and see any one of the CommsBar specialists Monday to Friday in Staples Studio. So that is it for this session. We're running at about 30 minutes. The next one will be at 4 o'clock, and we're going to be looking at generating commercially valuable awareness. It's one of the big challenges for the mainstream PR industry is justifying the value of their $5,000 or $10,000 retainer fees. I want to show you a system based on the methodologies I've shown you for compelling commercially valuable actions, how you can build strategies that are focused on commercially valuable awareness that delivers value to the business and can be measured to do so. So that is it for this session. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, get in touch. I'm available on Twitter, Facebook, comments in the video feed, and I'll be back at 4 with the next session.